Hello Exiles, this video is going to be a complete guide on how to use the PoE2 trade website. We'll talk about how to access the website, filters and stat groups, item affixes and how to use PoE2DB, how to search for an item, bulk item exchange, trading etiquette and tips, and at some point we'll also take a look at searching for and buying an item from start to finish. To access the website, go to www.pathofexile.com/trade2. I've left a link in the description so that you can just follow that. Log in with the account that you want to trade with and select the correct league from the drop-down menu. You should know too that when you go to message somebody to buy an item, you have to have your Path of Exile 2 client running so that your Path of Exile 2 client can message the person from the trade site. So make sure that your game is up and running when you're using the trade site. There are 7 groups of filters: type, equipment, requirements, waystone, miscellaneous, trade, and stat. Any of these groups can be collapsed by clicking the white checkbox to the left of them. Collapsed filter groups will not be used in the search. I'm going to go through quickly some of the more important filters on the side here. Probably the most important ones are item category. You can click here to select what type of item you want, and you can use the drop-down menu, or you could just type in the item and select it that way. Item rarity, normal are white items, magic are blue, rare are yellow, and unique are the orangish gold. Now, item level, I think people get mixed up on. Item level is not the level of the item. Item level is the power of the item based off of the zone that it dropped in, and item level determines what affixes can roll on that item in terms of tiers of affixes. We're going to go into that in a little bit more depth in a later section when we talk about PoE/DB. If you do need to get a specific level of an item, then you do it down here in requirements and you use this level, not item level. All right, damage. This is the physical damage on the item, what it rolls from base to max. Critical chance, physical DPS. This is going to be the damage per second. And there's a physical DPS and an elemental DPS filter here. You can also filter by attacks per second. So, a fast attacking weapon would be something like, 1.4, 1.5. And a really slow attacking weapon would be something like, 1 to 1.2. You can also put armor, energy shield, and evasion here if you wanted to look for a certain type of body armor, for example. By the way, as I'm going here, you can always click clear to get rid of all the search terms that are on here if you want to restart. Let's say for sake of argument, you wanted to use an armor item, but you didn't want any energy shield or any evasion on it, and you didn't care about the specific base. You could just put however much armor you want on there. And then for energy shield, you would just put max 0 and evasion max 0. And then only armor bases will come up. And you'll see there's a variety of different bases here that will come up. Now, another thing to note that's really important, I think people miss out on, is the fact that these equipment filters here have to do largely with the implicit modifiers on an item. So implicit are the ones that show up on the top. Explicit are the ones that show up on the bottom. There are some stats that are kind of both explicit and implicit, and people get these mixed up. Spirit is an example of one. So, for example, spirit can roll on an item as an implicit. So if I type in, minimum 50 spirit here, and I click go, it'll show me any item that has spirit on the top, but it won't show me the stuff that has spirit as a roll. But if I go to the stat filter side and I add spirit, it'll show me items that have spirit as an explicit modifier. So that's an important distinction when you're searching for items to trade. This goes for all of these. This goes for armor if you're looking for armor. Let's say for sake of argument, let me just clear this out. Let's say I wanted a 2000 armor chest piece. Okay, and I search for it. Now you'll see here on the implicit says 1756. That's the total armor that's on the body armor before quality is added. And then there's also explicit affixes on the bottom here, these are like needed to make this armor go up to that amount because the base item doesn't have like, 2000 armor, for example. So sometimes rather than putting these numbers here on like the right side under explicits, sometimes it's better to put them like there's the total number on the left under the implicit side so that you can just get the total number you want. Because most people are thinking like, oh, I want like a 2000 armor chest, not I want a chest with 187 to armor and 132% increased armor, because that's like more complicated than it needs to be. So consider that when you're choosing between using the like equipment filter or the stat filter. All right, then we have requirements. So we have a level requirement and then attribute requirements to put it on. So let's say for the sake of argument, I had a build that had like very little int. I might put like a max int of like 10 or something like that. And then that way, if I only had 10 int, then it wouldn't show me any items that I wouldn't be able to put on my character. All right, then we have waystone tier filters, waystone tier and waystone drop chance. This is going to be specific to waystones. Then there's some miscellaneous ones here. Gem level. This is the level of the gem itself, not the level that you need to have to put on the gem. Again, you use the requirements section for that here. When you're searching for gems, you can also search for a minimum number of sockets. So for sake of argument, let's say I wanted a minimum of a 5-link. A 5-link would have 4 gem sockets. It's like the skill itself plus 4. And then you can pick that up. And that's often a cheaper way to find an item rather than just like putting it on yourself, especially because you can get like a corrupted one very easily that way. You can also look for whether the item is identified or unidentified here, or corrupted or uncorrupted. And then lastly, down here, we have trade filters. You can search by specific seller's account if you want to do that. But the main thing that this section here is used for is buyout price. So you can see here it says relative. What I would suggest that you do is change this to exalted orb, because that's basically what everybody trades in. And then you can also put a maximum here too. Like let's say you have only 10x in your stash, and you can click 10x, and then you can search for your thing, and as long as it's under 10x, it'll show up there. Okay, then on the right side, we have stat filters. And this one is a little bit more complex because we have stat filters and we have stat groups, and we can modify the stat filter types here. So there's and, not, if, count, weighted sum. So let me go through what those mean right now. If you select and, all affixes in that list must be present. If you select not, none of the affixes in the list must be present. If you select if the mod is on the item, then it must be within a range. If you select count, a specific number of the affixes listed in the group must be present. And if you select weighted sum, the trade site will assign a power level to the item based off of the weights that you list. And you do that based off of which affixes you think are best for your gear. I'm going to show this in practice. You can always add an extra stat group by clicking this add stat group button here. And then you can change what type of stat group it is with this drop down. So let's start off with and, because that's the first one. This is all of the affixes must be present. So let's do an item example here. Let's actually, for all of these, let's just do a pair of boots. Okay, so let's say I guaranteed want movement speed in my boots. Okay, so I'll click increase movement speed. And I also want life. Now, when I go to click search, it'll only show me boots that have both movement speed and life on them. Okay, let's make it a little bit more complex by adding in a not. Let's say, for sake of argument, I don't need any more intelligence on my gear. I've got enough. So I'll put intelligence here. And now, when I click the search, it'll only show me boots that have both the movement speed and the life, but with no intelligence rolls. Next, let's take a look at the if. So let's say, for sake of argument, I wanted a chaos roll, but I didn't need a chaos roll, but I thought if a chaos roll was to be on the item, I wanted it to be within a certain range. So chaos res, let's say minimum of 10 to 30. Now, if I were to click search, if a chaos roll shows up, it'll be within 10 to 30. Now, just to showcase this, I'll add in the ones that must show up chaos res. That way we can show that it is indeed rolling between those modifier ranges. So there's one for 13, there's one for 12, so it is within that 10 to 30 range. All right, now the next one is count. So now let's say, for sake of argument, I wanted to get some resistances on my gear. Okay, so I've added cold, fire, and lightning res. Now, let's say I want at least 2 of these. Let's say, for sake of argument, I don't care which of them show up. I just want to increase my res, and maybe I can like cover the other one that's not on there on another piece of gear. So I'll count 2. That way, at least 2 reses will show up on this pair of boots. So we click go, and now we've got our guaranteed life and movement speed from the and 2 of the 3 count, which are fire, lightning, and cold. So you'll see there's a fire and lightning, a fire and lightning, a cold and lightning, fire and cold. So it'll pick 2 of those reses from that list. And let's say maybe life regen is also really good. Now I can put it to 3, and it'll get even more specific. So now it'll go to I'll either get 3 reses or I'll get 2 reses and a life regen on all of these pieces of gear. Okay. Now, let's say I wanted to use this weighted sum. Now, the way the weighted sum works is that it assigns a power level based off of the affixes that you want on there. So let's add some, what I would consider to be important stats for boots. So movement speed, life, and some of the reses. Gold, chaos res. Okay. Now, I would say the most important stat on here is movement speed. And I definitely want it to be like a minimum of 25 movement speed. So I'll put a really high weighting on this. Let's say like a 5. Life, I definitely really want life. I'll put that as a high weighted stat as well, but maybe not quite as high as movement speed. And reses are really good, but as long as there's a couple of them, then that's good enough. Now, if I click search, oops, hold on, let me set this to boots. Okay, it'll start giving me a number of boots, but you can see here it starts at a low sum. So let me put the sum up a little bit higher. Okay, now it's going to give me a power level of boot that has those stats on there that I wanted, with a weighting higher on the stats that I weighted higher. So 25 move speed, life I weighted highly, so life is showing up on here. If I organize this by sum, then I'll get more of the stats that I wanted in the power that I wanted them based off of how I weighted it. So you'll see like, the highest thing I rated was movement speed. So I've got a really good movement speed roll on here. Life is really high and res is really high. Now, of course, this is like an insane item. Like I'm not going to buy this, right? But let's say I wanted to get like a decent item. What I could do is I could go to buyout price, click Exalt, and then let's say I only have 10x to spend. I click search. I arrange by the power level, and here is the best pair of boots on the market for 10x based off of the stats that I want on my gear. And let's say, again, for sake of argument, that I'm playing like a armor-based build. I can put a 1 here for armor, and we'll put a 0 here for evasion and energy shield. Now it's only going to show me the armor bases. And there we go. I'll arrange that by sum again. Bada bing, bada boom. There's some really good briefs. And actually for 8x, this is a pretty reasonable deal. These are really good. So that's how you use all the different types of search terms on the PoE trade site. Now that we know how to use all the different search functions, let's take a look at item affixes and how to use PoE2DB to determine which affixes are able to roll on items and which affixes you should be looking for on the trade site. First thing that you need to know about affixes in PoE2 is that most equipment has 6 affixes, 3 of which are prefixes, and 3 of which are suffixes. And the mods that roll in the prefix slot can't roll in the suffix slot and vice versa. So it's important to know which ones are which. The exception to this is jewels, which have 4 affixes, 2 prefixes, and 2 suffixes on those. We can use PoE DB2 to determine what can roll in each affix slot, and you can go to PoE2DB at poe2db.tw, or I've left a link in the description. This is the PoE2DB site. There's a couple use cases for this site. First things first, you can go in and check out the different item bases. That's useful for trading. So what you do is you just come down here to item, and then you select which type of item you want, and then you can see all the bases for that. So for example, if I went to body armors here, I can just click over. These are all the uniques. But if you click this tab here, it'll show you all the white body armor bases that you can get. And then if you click up here where it says modifiers, this is where you can get all the affixes. So again, let's go with the boot example because we were using it earlier. Let's say I wanted to get some strength boots. I would click this, and then it shows you the prefixes and the suffixes for boots. So again, there's 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes that can roll on each item. So for our example, if we look here, movement speed and life are prefixes, and strength, like attributes and things like that, and resistances are suffixes. So if I got a pair of boots, or I was like looking to buy a pair of boots on the trade site, and I saw that it had life, mana, and increased armor, that would mean that the 3 prefix slots are used up. If I bought those, and even if it had like an open slot for like modification, if I used an exalted orb on it, I would guarantee get a suffix. I could never roll movement speed in those boots because there was only suffixes available. So that's basically why PoE2DB is like super useful, because you can see which mods land in each slot, and then you can kind of count them up and say like, okay, how much is left? How many more mods are available on this item? If I buy this item and I hit it with an X, what will happen to it? Does it have a chance of getting another affix that's useful to me, or is it out of space and I should be looking for a different item? The other important information from a trading perspective that PoE2DB shows us here with affixes is the item level of each affix. Now, I mentioned this earlier in the video that I'd come back to this. If you click into each of these affixes, it'll bring up a list of item levels required to get that affix. So for example, if I look here, the top roll of life on boots is 120 to 149. If I want to get that mod show up, I have to use a boot that has at least an item level of 56. But if I go down to movement speed here, you can see that the 35% increased movement speed mod, which is the best one, is an item level of 82. So if I wanted to get, if I was like really gung-ho on getting life, I could actually have a lower item level piece of gear than if I was like looking to get the highest movement speed roll. And also, if I had an item level 81 boot, I would not be able to roll this movement speed. So there's actually no difference between the 81 and the 70 if all I care about is getting movement speed. So there's like these like breakpoints for different affixes, and it does matter, especially if you're trying to craft it. So a practical example of this would be if I was buying a pair of boots that had an open prefix and I wanted to slam movement speed onto it with an exalted orb, I would have to make sure that that pair of boots was at least item level 82 for a chance to get the 35% movement speed. And if I didn't care too much about that 5%, I would have to make sure that the item level was at least 70. All right, so now that we've taken a look at the affixes and how to use the trade site, let's do a trade from start to finish. So I'll start off with some tips here on how to search for an item. So first things first, consider what stats are the most important to your build. Consider what affixes you do not want on the piece of gear you are looking for. Consider which base item is the best. Consider the stat and level requirements. Ensure that the item level is high enough for any missing affixes to be added later. And sort using exalted orbs unless the value of the items exceed 2 divine orbs. Okay, so let's use the trade site to buy a piece of gear for my new alt that I'm leveling, the level 48 Gemling Legionnaire. So the gear cannot exceed 48. I'm stacking strength. That's a must-have stat. I also can't put on any dex or int gear, so it's going to be an armor base. And my worst reses are fire and lightning res. Cold is fine, so I'm not going to worry about that one too much. Another thing to note, I have 3x that I've budgeted to spend on this piece of gear. So let's hop onto the trade site. Okay, so let's start filling in the stuff that is mandatory. So it can't be higher than level 48. I also said it's going to be an armor base. So we'll put energy shield and evasion to 0. It's a pair of gloves that we're looking to replace. So we'll put gloves there. And we said that the buyout can't exceed 3x because that is the budget for the piece of gear that I've set. Now, life is a really important stat, but minimum of 50. Strength, I'd like to get at least 15 strength on the gear, but 20 would be nice. And I need fire res on the gear. I'd also like some other stats. So these are the mandatory stats. These are the and stats, okay? Say minimum 20 fire res on there. And I'll need a couple of these other stats. So the other two resistances, lightning and cold. Okay, and plus level to melee skills would be really nice too. Let's just put 15 for each of these, 10 life regen per second, and at least 1. And let's just put the count as 1. So that means that this piece of gear, when we go to search for it, will have at least these things and then 1 of these things. Okay, so this doesn't exist, at least not for 3 exalts. So now we can start tapering some of these numbers down until we hit what we want to hit. No result. Let's unclick this for now and see if we can just get one with just the fire res on it. Okay, so we can get a piece of gear here with the fire res. It seems like the other things are what's creating the issue. This is pretty good. I could X slam onto this. It's 1x. So my budget was 3x. So if I bought something for 1x, I could slam onto this. Now we have life, strength, and res. So this was 1 prefix and 2 suffixes. So there's 1 suffix and 2 prefixes left on this item. So this one's a possibility. I would end up with a 5 affix item. And the chances of me hitting another res aren't like super high because there's only one suffix left. Okay, now this one here, we have life, increased armor, and then there's a hybrid life, and strength and fire res. So now this one has 4 mods, and it has a socketed fire res already on it. And there's 2 open mods, so I could hit a res if I slammed onto this for 3x. So let's buy this one and see what we can do here. So I'll go ahead and click send. Of course, my client has to be open in the background for the thing to send. Now, if you're ever wondering if you accidentally missed a invite, if you click J, you can go into Create Party tab, and any invitations that you get will show up in this tab. All right, well, he didn't respond. Oh, we got it. Okay. So I can't go to where he is because of his quest state. So what I'll do is I'll right-click and click Visit Hideout. Okay, now I'm here. And of course, he shows up right away because that's what you do. All right, it's 1x. And I check this and make sure it is what I wanted to buy. It is. Once I hover over it, it'll go green, and then I click Accept. Now it's in my inventory. I'm going to head back to my hideout. All right, and now we had a budget of 3x. If I hold Alt, I can see the mods that are already on this. Okay, so we're going to start slamming it. And holy, we got an enormous mana roll on it. So this was kind of a bust because I didn't get anything that I wanted on here. But this will sell, and I can do this again after. But at least for the purposes of the video, it was interesting to go out and buy a piece of gear and try to craft it myself. On to the bulk item exchange. To get there, you just click this second tab. And then there's an items I want and an items I have section. If you're buying something, typically you're going to set the side on the right here to exalted orbs, because that's what the vast majority of trading is done with. Sometimes you can use divine if you have like large amounts of a currency, but you're typically going with exalts. And then you click the currency that you want on the left side here. So if I wanted to buy chaos orbs, I would maybe buy it with exalts and then convert those into chaos that way. You can click all of these little drop downs to see all the different types of currencies. And then the only other thing to know here is that there's a stock count that you can set here. So for example, let's say I want to buy chaos orb, but I want to buy, I don't want to buy like one chaos orb from each person. I want to buy like 10 chaos orb at a time because I don't want to waste my time. I can put a minimum of 10 and then says can fulfill trade, yes. When I click search, now I can see a chaos orb. It's roughly 2-to-1 ratio. So if I wanted to buy 10, I would need 20 exalted orbs. And you can see the stock is over here. This person here has 13 chaos orbs, 23, 16, so on and so forth. So that way, if I wanted to buy a large stock, I can make sure that I get that. So that's kind of the whole point of the bulk item exchange, is that you can buy items in quantities greater than 1 and do so fairly effectively and fairly easily. So to summarize, select the item you want, select the item you have. Keep in mind that most buying and selling is done with X, and set a minimum stock to avoid trading with multiple people. Okay, last thing, trading etiquette and tips. When buying, always go to the seller's hideout to do the transaction. Don't message them, come to my hideout. Go to their hideout. That's just the standard for Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2 trading. When buying, double check that the item in the trade window is the one that you messaged the seller for. This is a super underrated tip, but there are scammers out there that will try to swindle you by giving you a similar looking item that's worth a lot less. When buying, always have your payment ready before visiting the seller's hideout. So if it's 5x, have 5x in your inventory when you hit the visit their hideout button. When selling, you have no obligation to leave your map or zone until the buyer arrives in your hideout. Don't waste your time in portals. Wait till you see, look on the left side where the character portraits are. You can see the zone that they're in. Wait until that zone changes to your hideout zone. Then go to your hideout. Somebody might just like add you to the group. Then maybe they've like messaged like a bunch of other people for a similar item, and then they leave your group, and you don't get the sale, right? And it sucks if you like left your map and you burnt a portal doing that. So just wait until they're actually in your hideout before you leave your map. Another thing, when preparing to sell, place the stash next to the waypoint in your hideout and ensure that the path to it is not blocked. Not everybody is going to watch this video and have their money ready to go. Some people need to access their stash when they're buying from you. So making sure your stash is right next to the waypoint and it's like easy and obvious to see is actually going to save you a lot of time. No walling people out. If you're buying and selling and one person doesn't have access to the quest state or a hideout for some reason, go to Act 1 Normal Town to trade. And if you're buying and selling, always thank the other person for the trade. It's common courtesy. All right, that is it for the video. I'm probably going to make another video on how to like list items in your tab and whatnot. This one was more about the PoE2 trade site in general and just how to navigate it and buy things off of it. But if you like this video, like and sub so that more videos like this can come around. Thanks a lot, guys. Peace.